Welcome to Latinas from the Block to the Boardroom, where wisdom comes from everywhere. This is a podcast about generational wisdom shared to help build a bridge for future generations and to build stronger communities through education, technology, and health. Welcome to Latinas from the Block to the Boardroom. Hola, amigas. November is here, and so is Small Business Saturday, November 26th. A day to celebrate and support small businesses and all that they do for the communities. So our amazing small businesses really keep our communities going. And today we'd like to highlight a small business on our podcast today, and that is Auntie Elsie's Oatmeal Crisp Cookies. Auntie Elsie's Oatmeal Crisps is owned and operated by Elsie Edible, who immigrated from Ghana and handcrafted a unique oatmeal cookie that just melts in your mouth. These thin, crispy oatmeal cookies are delicious and one of a kind. I know them very well. I get them every year. They come in 3 delicious flavors: cranberry, ginger, and classic oatmeal. Again, I seriously love these cookies, and they pair well with morning coffee, afternoon tea, or a lovely happy hour charcuterie platter with your favorite wine. They are super yummy. You can order your assorted holiday gift box or corporate gifts, as they make wonderful corporate gifts, or for family gatherings, or just enjoy them on your own. So go to AuntieElsies.com, and we'll have the link in the show notes. Support small businesses this holiday season. Gracias. Today, my special guest is Maricella Herrera Avila, the first Latina appointed CEO of the global organization, the Ellevate Network. It's the largest community for Women Plus at work, focused on creating a culture of equity and inclusion in business. She oversees overall business operations growth and strategy. As a strategy executive with 15 years of experience building and scaling teams, brands, and businesses, Maricella has led the creation of impactful programming such as annual Mobilize Women Summit, which reaches thousands of professionals across the globe and is supported by some of the world's leading companies. Maricella is also the host of the Ellevate podcast, conversations with women changing the face of business. Échale ganas. Let's get started with Maricella at Latinas from the Block to the Boardroom. All right, Maricella, thank you for joining me today on Latinas from the Block to the Boardroom. This is a very special podcast that I really have been thinking about doing around DEI and more Latinas and women of color coming into the space and how we show up and represent, well, just basically how representation matters. And you and I were talking a little bit about that. It's time. In other podcasts, I say we have the numbers, we show up, we just need to hear and see more of it. So thank you for joining me today to talk about the Ellevate Network, which you have recently become the CEO of the organization, which is a global women's leadership network. But you also mentioned that some men join as well, correct?
Correct. Well, first off, thank you, Teresa, for having me today on your podcast.
Sure, no worries. So one of the things we want to dig into here is your background, because you are, again, a lot of Latinas that I have on the podcast are usually first generation, which I find very interesting. I'm a third generation here in California. I know you're out on the East Coast. And, there's a lot of intersections of how we think about leadership, how we think about business, how we think about our communities. And that has a lot to do with our backgrounds and where we're from.
Right.
And so your family coming from El Salvador during the time of the 80s, late 80s, do I want to say? Was it during the late 80s?
Throughout the 80s, basically.
Mm-hmm. And the turmoil that usually happens down in Central America, a lot of us don't talk about that, but it really has an impact into a lot of when they get to the country and they find themselves really looking at that American dream. I want to talk about that and how that was kind of set for you in your journey from El Salvador. And then I think you said to Mexico City and then to Colombia, right? Business school. Oh my God.
Yes. I was born in El Salvador. I lived there for getting to adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
Throughout the time of war, I don't usually think about it that much, to be honest. But you and I were talking last time, and it's weird how what you live through when you're in your younger years has such an impact on how you see the world afterwards, right? So for me, living through a lot of the turmoil while there was an armed conflict going around, the resiliency that you built from just kind of trying to, tomorrow will be another day and things should work out, and it gets ingrained in your mind in some way or another. I do think that that also has something to do with my kind of fight or internal compass on fairness and wanting to bring that to anything that I do within my life. Because I always think, life is hard. And if we can make it a little less hard and a little bit more fair, it would be extraordinary. So I left El Salvador to go to college in Mexico, did that, worked in banking for a few years back there. And I didn't think I was going to come to the US, actually. I never had that in my mind. It was just, trying to do my thing, figuring out what I was good at, where I could use my talents, and how I could see what I could accomplish. In that moment, a lot of it was, first generation ambition.
Right.
Kind of like, my family went through all this. Now it's on me to do something bigger and better and greater. And I ended up coming to Columbia Business School in the US, loved my time there, came thinking I was going to be a banker and continue to be a banker, and realized that that was not me.
Yeah. You can share with us, why did you decide to go into that? Because I always talk about when you step into a different arena where you think you can make an impact, there's a reason where that drive comes from. So let's talk a little bit about the finance aspect part of banking. Why did you pursue that?
So first off, numbers made sense to me. So it was kind of one of those moments where I remember being in school and being in college and taking my first accounting class and being like, this is so logic driven. This just makes so much sense to me. So I kind of fell in love with the numbers, and that was my first foray into, let me see what this finance thing is all about. I honestly came into that world mostly because of ambition. And I'm going to repeat that word a lot of times because I think that lately I've been reading, I don't know if you've been reading some of the articles of how there's a whole narrative that women are not ambitious anymore. And I will call a lie on that.
You can say bullshit. I'll say it for you.
I will call bullshit.
It's bullshit.
It is bullshit. We're absolutely ambitious. Who says we're not?
Right.
We might care about things differently. But that doesn't mean there's no ambition. So I did go into finance because I thought it was going to give me the status, the money, the power in some way, shape, or form. I didn't know what I didn't know. So I didn't know that that would also mean it would take a lot of my life, honestly, that it would take a lot of my confidence. So instead of building it up, it kind of shot it down. And I was extremely lucky. So my first boss and mentor back then in the industry had been my professor in college.
Nice.
And he didn't remember me when I first came in for an interview, but afterwards, we started talking, and he was super supportive. So in that sense, I was extremely lucky. On the other hand, however, I was a young woman in her 20s covering some of the largest real estate developers in the north of Mexico. So
wow.
Talk about male dominated within male dominated within male dominated.
Wow.
And that was hard. That was hard because a lot of them did see me as, who's this little kid who's asking me for my financials or asking me all of these questions about how I run my business. And that's why it was so important to me to have a mentor or a sponsor really that had my back. And I don't think I could have done it without that. It did make me develop some thick skin. And I would say that that's probably the biggest thing I got from my banking experience. And, you say it's different in Mexico than in the US, and it absolutely 100% is. I mean, I do remember my going out to lunch with my clients and everyone drinking tequila and me being like, I don't know how to act in these situations.
Right.
But the culture in the US is still harder.
Mm.
The banking and finance world in the US is still, I would say, more closed off. Because over there, I had to fight with being a woman,
Mm-hmm.
but I wasn't a Latina until I moved to the US. I always like to say that.
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting perspective because you're in a country where Latinas are Latinas. I mean, we're not like, I think the only differentiator there sometimes, while it's still very apparent, is skin tone. And
skin tone and socioeconomic status.
Yeah.
Those are the
Yeah. And that's a lens that's very deeply rooted in a lot of past sentiments and colonization. And so is, the banking industry, if we look at it. I mean, a lot of people look to the US as a strong economic powerhouse. Right now, everybody is kind of failing in that arena right now. But this is a big change. And we've been through a lot of changes. You and I, in the years, you coming here, me being third generation, I've seen a lot of economic downturns, but that just means opportunity for a lot of people. And that's the way we have to look at that in some regard, because this is where things get turned upside down and the people walk away, which means new people can walk in. And if you're ready to walk in, this is what I say, the doors are open right now. And I think it couldn't be a better time for a lot of Latinas, which I am seeing, getting into these leadership positions like yourself. So
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Time is now.
The time is now. And one is, in your journey of banking, and you decided to say, okay, I'm going to pivot into business school because, talk to us about that, because I think there's a lot of our audience that debates whether or not going to, graduate school is a good thing. I always say, yes, it is, even though I myself didn't, but there's economic reasons for that. And that's because I've had more work experience and being in tech and being in an innovative industry and that I feel like a lot of strategic initiatives I've been on, that is an MBA in my arena. But I want to hear from you. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
That's a great question. I went to do my MBA because that's what I was supposed to do. Like, that was how my path had been charted by me. Like, honestly, no one else was telling me, but this is what I had envisioned in my life,
Right.
Graduate, work at a bank for a few years, go do an MBA, then do something bigger. Like I said, I was really, really, but in my younger years, really, really driven by that kind of, I want to do more. I want to do better. And I thought it was because I wanted to learn more. And I am an absolute nerd. Like, the amount of books, you do not want to see how many books I have on my coffee table, and they're all business books. I was just in a meeting before this, like, took out the step ladder to get books from that shelves back there. So I've always, like, if I could, I would be learning constantly.
Yeah.
And I wanted to learn. And I thought that was the main reason to do an MBA, get some knowledge. Turns out that was completely incorrect. I mean, I did gain some knowledge. But the reason I think everyone, if you have the possibility, because it is a big burden, you should do an MBA. And I don't even just say grad school, but like an MBA specifically, is because of the network you meet. That's really what you're getting out of. The alumni network that I have now because of that is fantastic. Even people who don't know me, and I see it for myself because people contact me online and are like, oh, hey, you're a Columbia alum. I'm a Columbia alum. Can you talk to me for a few minutes? And I absolutely will say yes. And that's the way it is. Like, so on one hand, I met amazing friends from all over the world. I did learn lots of great things. And I built this network, or became part of this little club that opened the doors for me. And to be honest, that's how I got this job, right? So I landed at Ellevate because through my time at Columbia, I met the founder of what was back then 85 Broads, now Ellevate, and started, building a relationship with her, working with her, helping her out on some of the things that she was looking to do for her passion project, which was Ellevate back then. And I ended up coming to work for her after, lots of thoughts of where I wanted to go and if I wanted to continue the finance. And, I told you the story. I was in the last interviews for a small boutique investment bank in Mexico and thinking, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back and this is it. And they asked me, just before we can get to anything else, do you have any plans of getting married in the next 2 to 3 years?
That's so crazy. I mean, that's totally illegal here in the United States to ask that. But, we're talking about Mexico. So
we're and a few years ago. Let's also give them that.
Right.
And I was like, no, which was also so like, I still kick myself for having that very chill reaction to it.
Right.
But I guess, and then after thinking about it and talking to Janet, who was the founder of 85 Broads and had become my mentor then, I didn't want to go into that type of environment.
Yeah.
In fact, it almost lit that. I have to thank that guy, honestly. I wish I remember what the bank was called, because I really have to thank him, because that lit the fire that I needed to take that already. I was very kind of hard stuck on the world isn't fair, things aren't fair, things need to be more equal.
Mm-hmm.
And then this comes along and it's the perfect opportunity for me to be like, screw this. This is not what I want to be part of. I want to be part of something that actually changes this. And that's how I ended up here.
Yeah. So what I like to say is that's a part of you living your life, to have enough experiences at that moment for you to say enough is enough. And I think just collectively what's happening in the world right now, that's exactly the moment we're living in right now. A lot of women right now are saying enough is enough. And then there's some other women that want to be in Gilead. I'm just going to flat out say that. Gilead, yes. Handmaid's Tale, yes. They want to be there. No, not for Latinas, I don't think. So
I don't think we were made for that.
No, I don't think so. We're all Junes over here.
And I'll say, this is, as you're saying that, this is where we're getting to enough is enough. And then when we come to it and say, this is enough is enough. Mm-hmm. Like, we're burdened with childcare, housework. And I don't have kids, but I can see it within the Ellevate community. I get to see a lot of what everyone's dealing with. Mm-hmm. Uncertainty in the economy, companies that don't value us, like all these things. And we say enough is enough. And then we're labeled as women have lost their ambition.
Yeah, no, it's not ambition. It's the support network that we need, right? It's a total support network. And yeah, I fight that too. It's, I'm going to say it. The fucking pandemic really put, some cement blocks on a lot of women's feet, because we were the ones that, especially Latinas, and we've talked about this in previous podcasts too, we're the ones at home taking care of mostly multi-generational families.
Yes.
And that is an economic downturn for us. The other thing is we're the ones having to still do the things that, unfortunately, culturally we buy into, and we do the things, right? If there was a shared understanding, like within the household, of duties, shopping, all kinds of things, right? With the kids, other than birthing them, this would be a different society in general, because there would be an understanding that we can't do this together. And so when they say lack of ambition, I kind of want to throw up the middle finger and just say, you know what? We have shackles. If we have a family, Latinas, we do this because we love our families. I'm not saying other people don't love their family, but it has been harder for us as a community. We don't have the resources that have been available to us.
Yep.
So this is where I get a little fired up with you and just say, you can shove it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I'm with you.
Okay. It's time to serve the tea in our second half of this episode. And as we mentioned earlier in the podcast, we are supporting Small Businesses Saturday, which is November 26th. And we're highlighting Auntie Elsie's Oatmeal Crisps. And we'd like to talk about her holiday gift boxes. Amigas, I cannot think of a more delicious way to share the chisme and these thin and delicious oatmeal crisps with friends and family this holiday season. Personally, I do love the ginger flavor. The real ginger bits that are in the cookie give you that snap of flavor, and they literally melt in your mouth. I give these oatmeal cookies as gifts every year, and they never disappoint. So get the tea ready for the second half of this episode and go to AuntieElsies.com. That's Auntie Elsie's, AuntieElsies.com, and shop now. It's perfect for the holiday season and support the Small Business Saturday. Gracias. This is very interesting to me because I've always said until women can own the finance, a piece of the finance industry, which you see a lot of women creating their own VCs, they are creating their own Ellevate, they're creating their own financial investment firms. This is very important because they're trying to create financial literacy, which we need more of. And I'm happy to talk about that with you. Or we can just talk about the relevancy of just why the ownership of finance for women in your leadership position is so important. Maybe that's part of the Ellevate network ambition that we talk about of why you're there. But I want to hear your take on that. So can you explain?
Yes. So I think a lot of it is just background and where Ellevate came from. Ellevate and Ellevate are completely separate entities and non-related. But because of where we came from women who were at Goldman Sachs. That's how small it started.
Oh.
Oh yeah, I know you sent me that article. I was like, oof.
I'm like, that's some juicy tea, or no, that's some savory tea to be drinking right now.
Oh yeah, yes. And there's a whole book that just came out on it too.
Oh wow, fire. Okay.
So I think because of that, the background, we have always thought about finance in a way, but at the same time, money is power.
Yes.
Like, whoever denies that is, I don't know what world you're living in. Mm-hmm. Money is power. And the reason that a lot of middle-aged, heterosexual, cisgender white males have power is because they have money.
Right.
And the silly thing is, women control more than $3 trillion of investable assets. And we control 86% of consumer spending up to the last time I remember looking up those numbers. That might have changed. So we have a lot of power.
Right.
And so it's what can we do with that power? And that's why sometimes we fight at Ellevate with the word empowering, because we're not asking anyone to give us power. We have that.
Right.
It's how do we use it? And I think this is where you're talking about how when we can actually get the finance institutions within the control of women. And I think it's when we have that money, realize that we have that money, that we have that power, and that we have those investable assets to open the doors for other people.
Yes.
I remember talking at an event a few years ago, actually, and it was for a Hispanic Heritage Month event, because of course that's what I was talking at. And they asked me, like, how can people support Latinos who are coming up the ranks? And yes, sure, mentor them. Yes, sure, sponsor them. Invest in them.
Right.
Like, give them the money.
100%.
A lot of these people are the ones that are starting businesses.
Yes.
Latinos are starting, and Latinas are starting businesses at like extremely high rates. So if we can get that money and put that to use towards these groups, then you're making a difference.
Right. Absolutely. I'm there 100% because, I'm there just in general because I am one of those people that pivoted. I was in tech. Enough is enough. I had enough of the shit show there. Just everything that was happening. I just said, okay, where can I be useful? What can I do? And this is why I started the podcast. This is why I want to bring other women that aren't in the leadership roles that are fighting that social justice impact in these organizations like Ellevate Network that you're in and other organizations. We are the least seen in these arenas of where we have been empowered, where we're moving into that C-suite. Nobody is highlighting that as much as nobody. That's just what I'm going to say. Nobody. And when we talk about the most powerful women that are Latinas or Black women, they want to bring us down. They want to silence our voice. They want to stop the communication from us trying to bring, as you say, we bring up others along with us and why we have these networks. I think it's important for us to learn more about the Ellevate Network and how it helps women in that arena and how it's an organization to join.
Yeah.
Maybe you can talk a little bit about that since you're at the helm of strategy and operations and the vision moving forward for the organization.
Yeah. You're going to have to shut me up when you had enough because I can talk about this for ages.
That's okay.
So Ellevate is, like I said, it's been around for 23, 24 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a new organization. It started out as 85 Broads, some women in Goldman Sachs being like, hey, we want to be connected. We want to help each other. They were leaving the company and wanted to stay in that alumni type group. Goldman did not like that.
Oh, of course not.
That's a story for another day.
Right. Let's see. Why are women leaving the finance industry in the 80s? Oh, I don't know.
And why do they want to stay together and get together and talk about things and help other people?
And let's see. There's a major lawsuit coming out now. Oh, okay. Yes. I get
it. So, we've been around for a really long time. I always say, I like to start with that always because that means our heart hasn't changed. Mm-hmm. Our whole mission of bringing people together to help each other, to bring each other up, that's not changed. Mm-hmm. However, we've adapted with the times. Mm-hmm. So we used to be that specific, group. Now, when you said, men, we say we are the largest community of women plus at work. Mm-hmm. And that plus for us represents non-binary individuals, transgender people, and men, anyone who believes that we should have gender equity mm-hmm. and can work towards it. Like we know we can't do it alone. So we bring those people along. And our whole thing is that we believe the world would be much better mm-hmm. if people felt like they belonged. If people felt like they belong in their workplace, that they belong in a position of power, in a position of leadership. And if you could see that, you started off this podcast by saying how representation matters.
Yes.
And that's something we try to put at the forefront. Mm-hmm. It's really lonely to be the other. It's really lonely to have a work life where you think no one else is going through the challenges when most likely a lot of us are.
Right.
So if we can make these spaces where women and non-binary individuals and men that care about gender equity can come together and talk about work honestly, authentically, and give each other advice, give it open doors for each other. Because again, like I said, a lot of it is open doors for one another. Then we could actually make a huge difference in the culture of business mm-hmm. and make companies be a little bit more human and the world be a little bit better and work suck a little bit less.
Right.
So that's what we do.
Awesome. So, you bring up a very interesting point about how we like to gravitate towards one another where we want to support each other. And I think that's really big in our community right now. Well, just in general. But my thought is when I look out into all the DEI stuff that's happening in tech, mm-hmm. when I look at all these other initiatives that a lot of people are trying to spearhead, I really want to get into maybe an understanding why is there so limited opportunities for us to be in those positions? Because I feel that's what creates the competition and the lack of collaboration. And this is inherently put in place in my thought process so that it is made that it is very limited and that we do have to struggle and be against one another. I don't see any other organizations like that. I mean, I've been in many interviews where I've lost out to opportunities for someone that knew somebody because they were on the crew rowing team and had an mm-hmm. English background, no tech experience, no strategic partnership experience, nada. And they got the job over me. You know what I mean? And so I'm just kind of looking at that like, okay, is it a social capital thing? Yes. Do they need to check a box? No, because there's no accountability. So I guess I'm kind of opening Pandora's box there about all of that. But I'd love to hear your take on those limited opportunities. And then also that social network that, is not really made for a lot of us that went to state schools or didn't get on the crew team, right?
I know exactly what you're saying. And this is another rant I've been going through, my fight for fairness.
Yay.
There's so much research out there of how the only way or the best way for people to move, for there to be class mobility. And we were talking about Latin America. And for me, I think a lot about class mobility and socioeconomic classes, because that's kind of the biggest issue, I would say, over there. Mm-hmm. And the way to advance class mobility is to have exposure and access to people who are more successful than you.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're describing right now is a network that's already closed.
Right.
And you can't break into that, so you can't move forward as the people who are there. There's a lot of places currently, and I will say a lot of other networks and groups like Ellevate that are perpetuating the same thing and the same problem.
Wow.
Which is why, for me, that's one of the biggest things for Ellevate that we have been inclusive forever, but is one of the changes that we want to make the most, which is like, we don't want to be in here in creating another siloed network where people are just the people who are already at the top, and those are the people that keep going.
Right.
It's actually, how do we bring these other people along? And the reality is, work sucks. Like, the way that the business world is structured right now is inherently flawed because of it.
Yeah.
But businesses are a collection of humans, right? At the end of the day, what we need is to get the humans within those businesses to be people who think like this.
Right.
To be the people who think as, let's open the door for others. Let's really bring the power of diversity, not to check a box, because what you end up doing when you do that is bringing a lot of people that are diverse, but are not bringing their perspectives because they need to feel like they belong. They need to feel like they are accepted by the majority.
Right.
So I don't think that it can change in any other way, but by dismantling the way that business is built right now.
Right.
And that is going to be a lot of work and a lot of time. And I think it is for the people who are coming up the ranks. That's why I always say it starts with managers. And their influence with their teams. And then it continues going up. You're not going to find again, middle-aged, heterosexual, cisgender male leader, CEO of a company being like, oh no, all of a sudden I'm enlightened and this is going to change.
Right.
It has to come bottom up many, many a times.
Right.
And, how do we make sure that the people who are going to be making the decisions in the next 10 years, 20 years, are people who want to do these things, want to open those doors?
Right.
So sadly, I don't think it's going to be necessarily right now. There has to be a mind shift of the pie is fixed. The pie can be big.
Right.
The table can be bigger.
Right.
So that more people can sit at it.
Right. And the old saying is, if you don't see enough chairs, then bring your own chair. Or I just say, just forget it. Go build your own table and see what you can do. And then come back later and say, look what I built. And now you have to pay me 5 times more than what you thought you could bring me on for. I mean, that's kind of like a strategy play there, I think. It really is. So I like to get your perspective on this concept or thought of bringing in our authentic self, our community, and then somehow wrapping that in or having a platform within a business to say, this is how the community works. How would it pair with what we have today to change it?
No, let's remember businesses are a collection of humans. So every person that goes into work, and it goes from wherever you are, realizing that you have a voice, that you can set your own boundaries, that you can ask for what you need, and being your authentic self. I mean, whenever I hear that, especially in the context of talking about Latinas, 72% of Latinos say they can't be themselves at work. And it's such a high number, and it's so sad. And I absolutely believe it and think that it's probably in reality more than that.
Yeah.
Not everywhere gives you the permission to be there. And that's why I say it begins with the managers and at the team level. You can't dismantle, like you said, yes, I want to dismantle a whole business culture, but you can start with the people around you. You can start with giving permission to the people on your team to come as themselves and for you to back them up.
Right.
You can start by helping someone that doesn't look like you or doesn't sound like you get a little bit of support or get that word in. There's a whole thing that the Obama administration used to do, and the women at the Obama administration used to do, of amplifying each other during meetings so that at least they were being heard.
Right.
So that's the type of thing that I think is, can we get individuals to bring those small actions at a micro level within an organization, and then that will begin the change. So I guess the way I'm thinking of the dismantling isn't necessarily let's tear it all down, although that would be very nice. It is about how do we each individually do something to make it a little less unfair.
Right. So what books would you recommend just for Latinas and, our communities that are looking into a leadership path, or maybe they're in a career right now and they're like, I really want to change things here. It's a good company, but there's a lot of things that need to change, because I completely understand when people say, I can't just say you're screwed up and things need to change. There's a different way of an approach, obviously.
Yep.
And what would you suggest for folks to do in that capacity to, I guess, raise their hand to say, I have an idea. I would like to propose something, get that confidence, but how do they back it up? Like, are there books? Are there resources? Like, what do you think?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you need backup for proving some of the points, there's tons of research. I would say hit up the Ellevate website and you'll find tons of stuff.
Oh, awesome.
But there's a couple of management books that I think are some of the best. I always recommend them. There's like 3 books that I always recommend, regardless of who you are and where you are. One is The Culture Code. It's a fantastic book about organizational culture and how the best groups function. And it covers everything from Navy SEALs to people who work at restaurants and how they come together. And I think it's a very good blueprint for anyone who wants to make organizational change within their company, wherever you are, because you can find a lot of these are the things that make teams work. And so if you're a manager, hugely useful.
Okay.
So that's one. Also, if you're a manager, Radical Candor, I think it's a fantastic book, a great way to know how to deal with your teams. And I keep emphasizing on the manager part because like I said before, I really believe that that's where change will start in organizations. Yep. And then one that honestly, for anyone, anywhere, thanks for the feedback. It's on communication. It's on how to receive feedback, but you get a lot of tips on how to give it to.
Oh, good.
And it's fantastic. It's such a good book because it really changes the way that you relate and hear what other people are saying to you. And it makes you think about it in a way of also when you say something to someone, when you raise your hand to ask for that, how can you phrase it so that it goes through to that person in a way that's going to be productive? So thanks for the feedback. Swear by it.
Okay. Awesome. Well, we'll put those in the show notes for everyone to look up. So I have one question about those books. Are they all written by men? Just FYI. No,
actually.
Okay.
Culture Code is written by a man. Radical Candor is a woman. And the other, I think it's a man and a woman.
Are they any people of color?
That I can't remember.
So I think I
should do my homework.
This is a huge opportunity, I think, for anyone out there that is in a job role. And you also, this is just my take, that we need more folks of color writing about 100%. Their experience in management, in organizations, how we can put out our perspective in cultural changes. I know there's a few books right now that are changing that around DEI, but I think just from a management perspective and a leadership, because I don't see any books really. There's a few that are out there, but you see a ton of books written by men, white men in leadership, how to do this, what to do this, that, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, that's it.
Teresa, you're blowing my mind, honestly, right now. I'm going through my roster of all the books, and I read a lot of books, and I'm trying to think of one, and I'm having a hard time. And that's not good.
Yeah.
That's really not good.
Yeah. I think this is the platform for you. I think this is an opportunity for you, Maricella, and anybody else out there that's, working in tech that is a person of color, because I don't see any. They're even revamping books that were written at Stanford Business School by white professors that are like, oh no, here's a new version. And I'm like, can we just have a new version with a person of color writing it and their take on it? I'm like, Come on now. Like, there's no people of color at Stanford in business school. I mean, they have a whole Latino cohort, entrepreneur business school going on there. Nobody can write a book. I mean, come on.
You are blowing my mind. Absolutely. No, I'm putting this on my list. I'm going to amend my bucket list to make it more specific.
Yeah, do it. I'm there. And when it comes out, I mean, I would say rapido. Let's get it down. Like, start typing away today. Typing. Yeah. I just fucking dated myself as a dinosaur right there. So thank you, Maricella, for your time today. And I look forward to your book signing. I'm just saying it right now. Your book
putting it out in the universe.
I'm putting it out there right now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Teresa. It was so much fun.
Oh, good. Glad. Gracias, Maricella, for joining us today on Latinas from the Block to the Boardroom. I'm excited to see more Latinas and just women of color and our diverse communities breaking barriers in industries and politics to change the current narratives for the inclusivity of our future, where we can rise together. I'm very excited for 2023 and beyond. So, Ellevate Network is a membership organization that Maricella is from, and it's accessible to all. And you can find them at ellevatenetwork.com to learn more. And to contact Maricella, you can reach her through LinkedIn at Maricella, her first and last name, for more information, and her podcast, Conversations with Women Changing the Face of Business. This podcast was produced by Teresa Gonzalez of 5E Leadership and Marketing and Latinas B2B Marketing. Also co-produced by Robert Lopez, audio engineer and sound designer. Please follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn and subscribe to our podcast newsletter to learn more about our small businesses, events, and promos that you can find at latinasb2b.com. Gracias.